You're listening to The Night Watchman, where the stories may sound fictional, but the fear feels real. Before we begin, hit like, subscribe, and tell us in the comments where you're listening from. Now turn off the lights, lock your doors, and don't stop listening. I still remember the exact smell of that Burger King. Not the normal smell of fries and grilled meat. This one smelled like wet concrete, burnt coffee, and something old that had been trapped inside the walls for years. My name is Ethan Miller, and in October 2024, I was working the overnight shift at a Burger King outside a small town in Pennsylvania. I took the night shift because I needed the money. My mother had passed away 6 months earlier, and my younger sister Lily was still in college. I had promised Mom before she died that I would help Lily finish school, so I worked wherever I could. The Burger King was open 24 hours, but after 1 a.m., it was usually empty. Most nights there were only three of us. Me, a college kid named Marcus, and our manager Daniel. Daniel was 46 and had worked at that location for almost 11 years. He knew every sound the building made: the freezer, the vents, the pipes. Even the strange clicking noise the drive-thru speaker sometimes made when nobody was there. One night around 2:17 a.m., Marcus suddenly looked toward the front windows. Did someone just walk past? I looked up. Nobody was outside. The parking lot was empty. No, I said. Marcus stared through the glass. I swear I saw a woman. Daniel didn't even look up from the register. Don't worry about it. Marcus laughed nervously. You say that like this happens all the time. Daniel finally looked at him. It does. That was the first time I noticed something strange about Daniel. He wasn't joking. At around 2:40, a black SUV pulled into the parking lot. The headlights stayed on. Nobody got out. We waited. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Finally, the SUV slowly drove away. Marcus watched it disappear. People are weird. Daniel said nothing. Then the drive-thru speaker crackled. A woman's voice came through. Can I get a number 7? I walked toward the speaker. Sure. What drink? Silence. Then she whispered, Don't let him see me. I froze. Ma'am. The speaker clicked off. Marcus looked at me. What did she say? Before I could answer, the speaker turned on again. This time, the voice was much closer, almost like someone was standing directly behind the speaker. Ethan. My stomach dropped. I had never told the customer my name. I stepped backward. Daniel immediately grabbed my arm. Inside. Now. There was something in his voice I'd never heard before. Fear. Real fear. We locked the front doors. Daniel turned off the dining room lights and pulled the blinds. Marcus whispered, What's happening? Daniel didn't answer. Instead, he walked into the office and opened an old metal filing cabinet. He pulled out a yellow folder. Then he handed it to me. Inside was a newspaper clipping from 2009. The headline read, Local woman disappears after late-night Burger King stop. The woman in the photograph was the same woman I'd heard through the speaker. Her name was Sarah Whitmore. Daniel sat down. She worked here. I stared at him. What? Sarah was the overnight manager. He pointed toward the kitchen. Back then, this building had a storage basement. I looked confused. There isn't a basement. Daniel shook his head. There used to be. According to him, Sarah had disappeared one night after closing. Security footage showed her walking into the kitchen at 2:17 a.m. She never walked out. Police searched the building. Nothing. No body, no blood, no evidence. Just one thing. A single receipt printed at exactly 2:17 a.m. The order was a number 7 meal. No customer was ever found. Daniel looked at me. Every few months, someone hears her. Why? He looked toward the kitchen. Because she wasn't the first. Suddenly, something slammed against the back door. Marcus screamed. We all jumped. Another slam, then another. Someone was knocking. 3 slow knocks. Daniel whispered, Don't open it. The knocking stopped. Then we heard footsteps. Inside the kitchen. Marcus looked at me. But nobody's in there. We slowly turned toward the kitchen entrance. The fluorescent lights were flickering, one by one. Click, click, click. Then the fryer turned on by itself. The oil began bubbling, and the receipt printer started running. Paper poured onto the floor. Daniel walked toward it. I grabbed his shoulder. "Don't." He looked at me. "I have to." He picked up the receipt. His face went completely white. "What does it say?" He didn't answer. I took it from his hand. There were only 3 words printed on it. "Welcome back, Ethan." I couldn't breathe. I'd never worked there before. That night was my first month anniversary. I had never visited the restaurant as a kid. At least I didn't remember doing so. Then I noticed something underneath the receipt. A handwritten note. My mother's handwriting. I knew it immediately. The note said, "Ethan, if you ever see Sarah, don't follow her." My knees almost gave out. My mother had been dead for 6 months. Daniel looked at me. "Your mother knew about this." "I don't know." Then we heard a woman's voice from the kitchen. "Ethan." It sounded exactly like my mother. "Baby?" I started crying. I couldn't help it. I hadn't heard my mother's voice since the day she died. She called me by the nickname she had used when I was little. "Baby, come here." I took 1 step toward the kitchen. Daniel grabbed me. "That's not your mother." The voice changed. Now it sounded like Sarah. "He's lying." Then Marcus screamed. We turned. He was pointing at the dining room window. A woman was standing outside. Long dark hair, white Burger King uniform. Her face was pressed against the glass. But something was wrong. Her feet weren't touching the ground. She slowly raised one hand and pointed toward the kitchen. Then she mouthed 4 words. "He's still down there?" Suddenly, every light in the restaurant went out. Total darkness. Marcus grabbed my arm. Daniel shouted, "Stay together!" Then we heard something crawling beneath the kitchen floor. Slowly, heavy, dragging itself from one end of the building to the other. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Then silence. A phone rang. It was coming from the office. Daniel walked toward it. I followed. The phone stopped before he could answer. Then it rang again. Daniel picked it up. "Hello?" His expression changed. He slowly handed the phone to me. "It's for you," I put it to my ear. My mother's voice whispered, "Don't let Daniel open the basement." I looked at Daniel. He was already holding a key, a large rusty key. "Where did you get that?" He didn't answer. Instead, he walked toward the kitchen floor. There was a metal door hidden beneath an old rubber mat. I had never seen it before. Daniel inserted the key. Marcus grabbed him. "Don't open that!" Daniel shoved him away. "I'm sorry." The door opened. A freezing wind rushed out, and underneath the restaurant was a staircase that shouldn't have existed. At the bottom was an old room. There were dozens of Burger King uniforms hanging from the walls. Dozens. Each had a name tag. Sarah, Michael, Rebecca, Tom. People who had disappeared over the years. And at the very end was one empty hook. A name tag hung beneath it. "Ethan." I stepped backward. Daniel started crying. "I'm sorry." "Why?" He looked at me. "Because every 11 years, it needs someone new." "What does?" Something moved behind him. A tall figure slowly stepped from the darkness. It wasn't human. Its body looked stretched. Its face was hidden beneath an old paper crown. Daniel whispered, "Run!" We ran. Marcus reached the stairs first. I followed. Daniel stayed behind. The thing grabbed him. He screamed once. Then the basement door slammed shut. We ran through the restaurant and smashed the front doors open. Outside, dawn was beginning. We called the police. When they arrived, they searched the entire building. There was no basement, no hidden staircase, no uniforms, no Daniel, and no Marcus. The police told me I had been alone when they arrived. I refused to believe them until they showed me the security footage. At 2:17 a.m., I walked into the kitchen alone. At 2:31, I opened the basement door. Then I stood there talking to nobody for almost 40 minutes. At 3:12, I walked outside alone. Marcus and Daniel never appeared on camera. I quit that same morning. 3 weeks later, the Burger King was demolished because of what officials called structural problems. They never found anything underneath it. But last month, I received an envelope. No return address. Inside was a Burger King receipt. The date was yesterday. The time was 2:17 a.m., and the order was a number 7. On the bottom, 3 words were printed. "We miss you, Ethan. I haven't slept properly since." Because last night at exactly 2:17 a.m., my phone rang. I answered. Nobody spoke. Then I heard the sound of a drive-thru speaker crackling, and my mother's voice whispered, "Baby." A pause, then she said, "Your shift starts now." Story 2. The first time I saw the Burger King, I thought Google Maps was wrong. The second time, I realized it was waiting for me. My name is Daniel Carter, and until October 2024, I worked the overnight shift at a Burger King outside a small town in western Pennsylvania. It wasn't one of those busy locations you see beside a highway. This one sat almost a mile away from Route 22, surrounded by thick woods, an abandoned gas station, and an old service road that hadn't been used in years. The restaurant stayed open 24 hours because truck drivers sometimes stopped there after midnight. Most nights, I was the only employee inside. At first, I actually liked working nights. There was something peaceful about locking the doors after the evening crew left, turning down the lights, cleaning the kitchen, and listening to the low hum of the refrigerators. I had taken the job because my mother had recently passed away, and I needed something that kept my mind busy. She had raised me alone. After she died, my apartment felt too quiet, so I started taking extra shifts, especially overnight ones. I told everyone I liked the money. That wasn't the whole truth. I just didn't want to go home. My manager, a woman named Melissa, warned me about one thing during my first week. She pointed toward the drive-thru window. After 2 a.m., don't open that window unless you can see the customer's face. I laughed. Why? She didn't laugh. Because sometimes people come through here who aren't actually there. I thought she was joking. She wasn't. But I didn't understand what she meant until 3 weeks later. It happened on a Tuesday night. 2:13 a.m. The parking lot was completely empty. Snow had started falling, and the wind was pushing it across the asphalt. I was wiping down the counter when the drive-thru speaker crackled. "Welcome to Burger King. Can I take your order?" Silence. I waited. Then a little girl's voice came through. "Can I have a Whopper?" I froze. She sounded about 8 years old. I pressed the button. "Sure. Anything else?" "Chocolate milk." I smiled. "Okay." Then she said something that made the smile disappear. "And one small coffee for my daddy." I stared at the speaker. There was something about the way she said it. Not scared, not sad, just normal. Like she'd ordered the same thing 100 times. I prepared the food. Then I looked outside. There was a car sitting at the speaker, an old dark blue Ford Taurus. The driver's window was down, but I couldn't see the driver. I walked toward the window. Remembering Melissa's warning, I stopped several feet away. "Your total is $9.47. No response. Then the little girl's voice came through the speaker again. "He's asleep." I looked at the car. My heart started beating faster. "Who's asleep?" "My daddy." I couldn't see anyone inside. I stepped closer. The windshield was covered in fog from the inside. Then I noticed something. There was a child's hand pressed against the rear passenger window. Small fingers. 5 of them. I backed away. The car suddenly started moving. It drove around the building. I ran to the front windows, but it never came out of the parking lot. It simply disappeared. I checked the cameras. Nothing. No car. No little girl. Nothing. I called Melissa. She answered after 3 rings. I told her what happened. She stayed silent for almost 10 seconds. Then she asked, "Did she order coffee?" "Yes." Melissa sighed. "Daniel, don't serve it." "What?" "Whatever you do, don't make the coffee." I looked toward the coffee machine. I had already made it. Melissa whispered, "Throw it away." "Why?" "Because that order happened before." My stomach tightened. "When?" She didn't answer. "Melissa?" Finally, she said, "October 17th, 2016. I looked at the date on my phone. October 22nd. 8 years. Almost exactly. She told me the story. A father named Michael Harris used to work nights at a nearby warehouse. One night, he picked up his 8-year-old daughter, Emily, after her mother's shift ended. They stopped at the Burger King around 2 a.m. Emily ordered a Whopper and chocolate milk. Michael ordered coffee. They never made it home. Their car crashed on the old service road behind the restaurant. Michael died instantly. Emily survived for almost 40 minutes. She was trapped in the back seat. No one found her until morning. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I searched online. There it was, a newspaper article from 2016. Father and daughter killed in an overnight crash. The photograph showed the exact same dark blue Ford Taurus. But there was something else. The article said the crash happened at 2:17 a.m. 4 minutes after I received the order. I quit the next day. At least I tried to. Melissa convinced me to stay until they found someone to replace me. I agreed. That was my mistake. Because the next night, the Burger King changed. At exactly 2:13 a.m., the drive-thru speaker came alive. This time, the little girl didn't order. She whispered, "Daniel?" I stopped breathing. Nobody at work knew about the previous night except Melissa. "How do you know my name?" Silence. Then, "Because Daddy told me." I walked backward. The kitchen suddenly felt freezing. Then the printer behind the counter started printing an order. I hadn't touched anything. 1 Whopper, 1 chocolate milk, 1 small coffee. And underneath the order was a message. "Please don't let him fall asleep." I stared at it. Then I heard a car door slam outside. I looked through the window. The blue Taurus was parked beside the dumpster. This time I could see someone sitting in the driver's seat. A man. His head was tilted forward, motionless. I called 911. Before I could speak, the lights inside the restaurant went out. Every single light. The refrigerators stopped humming. The kitchen went completely silent. Then the drive-thru window tapped. Once, twice, 3 times. I didn't move. A little voice whispered from the other side. "Daniel." I closed my eyes. "Please go away." The tapping stopped. Then the voice said, "He's waking up." I opened my eyes. The driver's seat of the Taurus was empty, but something was standing directly outside the drive-thru window. A man, tall, wearing an old Burger King employee uniform. His face was hidden in shadow. He slowly raised his hand and pointed toward the kitchen. I turned around. The back door was open. I knew I had locked it. Then I heard footsteps, slow footsteps, coming from the kitchen. I ran. I grabbed my keys and rushed toward the front door. But before I reached it, the drive-thru speaker crackled again. The little girl screamed, "Don't let him leave." I stopped, not because I wanted to, because I heard my mother's voice behind me. "Daniel." My blood turned cold. I hadn't heard my mother's voice since the day she died. I turned around. Nobody was there. Then she spoke again. "You don't have to go home anymore." I started crying. I don't know why. Maybe because I missed her. Maybe because some part of me wanted to believe it was really her. I took one step toward the voice, then another, and suddenly I realized something. My mother never called me Daniel. She always called me Danny. Always. I stopped. The voice behind me changed. It became deeper, older, angrier. "You should have stayed." I ran. I reached the front door, unlocked it, and sprinted into the parking lot. I didn't stop until I reached my car. When I looked back, every light inside the Burger King was on, and someone was standing behind the glass. A little girl. Emily. She was staring directly at me. She raised her hand and waved. I drove home. The next morning, I called Melissa. She didn't answer. I called again. Nothing. When I arrived at the restaurant that afternoon, there were police cars everywhere. Melissa had disappeared. Her car was still in the parking lot. Her purse was inside. Her phone was on the manager's desk, and beside it was a printed receipt. 1 Whopper, 1 chocolate milk, 1 small coffee. The police asked me if I knew anything. I told them everything. They searched the building. They found nothing. But one officer eventually showed me something from the security footage. At 2:13 a.m., the camera showed me standing behind the counter, alone. Then the footage showed me walking toward the drive-thru window. But I wasn't alone. A little girl was standing beside me, holding my hand. I never saw her that night, not until I watched the video. The police closed the case 3 months later. Melissa was never found. I moved to Ohio. I changed my phone number. I stopped working nights. I never went near another Burger King. For almost 2 years, nothing happened. Then last Friday, I was driving home at night. It was raining. I stopped at a red light, and I saw a Burger King sign across the road. I almost laughed. Then I looked again. The restaurant was old. The parking lot was empty, and something about it looked familiar. I checked Google Maps. There was no Burger King there. In fact, according to the map, there wasn't even a road there. I drove past anyway. The building disappeared behind me. Then my phone buzzed. A notification. A food delivery order. I hadn't ordered anything. I opened it. One Whopper, one chocolate milk, one small coffee. Underneath it was a message. Daddy is awake now. I pulled over. My hands were shaking. Then another message appeared. You left us once, and then a final one. Don't leave us again. I looked into the rearview mirror. A little girl was sitting in the back seat. Emily, she smiled. Then she whispered, drive, Danny. I don't remember putting the car into gear. I don't remember where I went. I only remember driving. And the last thing I heard before the story on my phone ended was a man's voice coming from the passenger seat. A voice I had heard once before. 8 years earlier, Michael Harris. He whispered, thank you for bringing her home. The next morning, police found my car abandoned beside an old service road in Pennsylvania. The driver's door was open. The engine was still running. There was no sign of me, but on the passenger seat they found one receipt, one Whopper, one chocolate milk, one small coffee, and underneath it, written in black ink, were 5 words. We're open all night, Danny. Story 3, I still remember the first thing that felt wrong about that Burger King. It wasn't the empty parking lot. It wasn't the flickering sign. It wasn't even the fact that the restaurant appeared to have no customers at 2:13 in the morning. It was the smell. Fresh burgers, hot fries, onions cooking on the grill. The smell was so strong that I could almost taste it. And that was strange because the entire building had been officially closed for almost 11 years. My name is Ethan Miller, and in the winter of 2022, I was working night shifts for a private security company in Pennsylvania. I had taken the job because my mother had passed away 6 months earlier, and after losing her, I couldn't stand being inside my apartment at night. Working until sunrise was easier. It gave me something to do, something to listen to, something to keep my mind busy. My usual assignment was checking empty commercial properties around Harrisburg. Most nights were boring. Drive to a location, walk around the building, check doors, take photographs, leave. But one Thursday night, my supervisor called me around midnight. Ethan, I need you to check one more property. I looked at the address on my phone. It was an old Burger King restaurant on a road outside Harrisburg. Is it still operating? No. How long has it been closed? There was a pause. 11 years, I think. Then why am I checking it? Motion sensor went off. I laughed. Probably a raccoon. Probably. But his voice didn't sound convinced. He gave me one instruction before hanging up. Don't go inside. I remember thinking that was a strange thing to say to a security guard, but I didn't ask questions. At 1:47 a.m., I pulled into the parking lot. The place looked exactly like every abandoned fast food restaurant I'd ever seen. Cracked pavement, dead grass, dirty windows, a faded Burger King sign leaning slightly to one side. There was even an old drive-thru menu standing behind the building. I parked near the entrance and stepped out. The air was freezing. My breath appeared in front of me. I walked around the building, shining my flashlight through the windows. Nothing. No movement. No broken glass. No signs of anyone being inside. Then I reached the back of the restaurant and smelled the food. I stopped. For a moment, I thought I was imagining it. Then I smelled it again. Grilled beef, French fries, warm bread. I checked my watch. 1:58 a.m. I walked toward the back door. It was locked. I tried the handle anyway. Nothing. Then I heard something. A soft metallic sound from inside. Clink. Like someone putting a metal tray on a counter. I froze. Then another sound. Clink. I stepped backward. My radio suddenly crackled. Unit 14. Status? It was my supervisor. I pressed the button. I'm at the property. Anything? I looked at the dark building. No, everything is secure. Then I heard a woman's voice behind me, very quietly. Ethan. My blood went cold. I turned around. Nobody was there. I grabbed my flashlight and pointed it across the parking lot. Nothing. I raised my radio. Did you just say my name? My supervisor answered immediately. No. I looked toward the building again. One of the lights inside had turned on. A yellow light. Right above the kitchen. I knew that was impossible. I walked back toward the front. The main entrance was supposed to be locked, but when I pulled the door, it opened. I stood there for several seconds. My supervisor had specifically told me not to go inside, so I should have walked away. I should have called the police. I should have done anything except what I actually did. I stepped inside. The restaurant smelled brand new, not abandoned, not dusty, new. The floors were clean. The tables were polished. The chairs were perfectly arranged. And behind the counter, the menu lights were on. I looked up. The digital menu showed burgers, fries, chicken sandwiches, drinks. Everything looked normal, except for one thing. There were no prices. I whispered, "What the hell?" Then I heard the drive-thru speaker. "Welcome." I nearly jumped out of my skin. A woman's voice came through it. "May I take your order?" I walked toward the counter. "Hello?" No answer. Then the speaker crackled again. "Mr. Miller?" I stopped breathing. "How do you know my name?" Silence, then. "You haven't ordered yet." I turned toward the entrance. The front door was closed. I walked over and pulled it. Locked. I pulled harder. Nothing. I grabbed my radio. "Dispatch, I'm inside the property. I need assistance." Only static answered. Then the kitchen lights came on. One by one. Click, click, click. I heard footsteps, slow footsteps, coming from behind the kitchen door. I backed away. The door opened. A young woman walked out. She looked about 25. She was wearing an old Burger King uniform. Her face was pale. Her hair was tied behind her head, and she was holding a paper bag. She looked directly at me. Then she smiled. "Your usual." I stared at her. "I've never been here before." Her smile disappeared. "Yes, you have." I shook my head. "No." She slowly placed the bag on the counter. "You came here with your father." My heart stopped. My father had died when I was 16, and he had never worked at Burger King. I whispered, "You're mistaken." The woman looked at me with an expression that wasn't frightening anymore. It was sad. "That's what he said too." Then she walked away. I didn't follow her. I couldn't. I stood there staring at the bag. On the front was a name written in black marker. Ethan. My hands began shaking. I opened it. Inside was a Whopper, a small fry, and a chocolate milkshake. My exact childhood order. The order my father used to buy me after football practice when I was 10 years old. Nobody knew about it. Not my friends, not my coworkers, nobody, except my father and my mother. I slowly sat down at a table. There was a photograph lying beside the bag. I picked it up. It was an old photograph of me and my father. I was 10. He was standing beside me. Behind us was a Burger King restaurant. I recognized the building. It was this one. I had forgotten it. But suddenly, I remembered. My father hadn't taken me there after football practice. He had taken me there the night he disappeared. I had spent my entire childhood believing he had abandoned us. My mother had told me he left. She said he had another woman. She said he didn't want to be a father anymore. I believed her, until that moment, because I remembered something else. My father had been scared that night, very scared. And before he disappeared, he had told me, if anyone asked, we were never here. I dropped the photograph. Then I heard the kitchen door slam. I stood up. "Where's my father?" The woman appeared again. This time she wasn't smiling. "He never left." I felt tears forming in my eyes. "What does that mean?" She pointed toward the kitchen. "He came looking for someone." "Who?" "You." I shook my head. "I was 10. She nodded. "He knew." "Knew what?" She looked toward the dining area. Every table was suddenly occupied. People were sitting there. Men, women, children, all completely silent, all staring at me, and every single person was holding a Burger King paper bag. The woman whispered, "This place doesn't serve food." "Then what does it serve?" She looked at me. "Memories." The lights went out. I heard dozens of people whispering my name. Ethan! 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 I ran toward the entrance. The door was suddenly open. I sprinted outside. I didn't stop until I reached my car. I locked the doors and started the engine. As I drove away, I looked into the rearview mirror. The restaurant was gone. There was only an empty, overgrown lot. I called my supervisor. He answered immediately. "Where are you?" I told him what happened. There was a long silence. Then he said, "Ethan, what Burger King?" I gave him the address. He said something that I will never forget. "That building was demolished 11 years ago." I pulled my car over. "No." "Yes." He sounded frightened now. "There's an apartment complex there." I drove back the next morning. He was right. There was no Burger King. There hadn't been one for years. But I still had the photograph. I still had the paper bag. And I still had the receipt. The receipt was dated November 14th, 2011. At the bottom, there was a message printed in tiny letters. I didn't notice it until I got home. It said, "Thank you for coming back, Ethan." I never told my mother. She died 3 months later. After her funeral, I searched through her belongings. In an old box beneath her clothes, I found something. A newspaper clipping. The headline said, "Local Burger King employee and 10-year-old boy missing." The employee was my father. The boy was me. But there was something impossible about the article. It said the police had found my father dead inside the restaurant. And according to the report, I had been found sitting beside him, alive, but unconscious. The strangest part? The restaurant had burned down that same night. My mother had taken me from the hospital and convinced me that none of it had happened. She erased the memory, or tried to. But some memories don't disappear. They wait. 3 nights after finding the newspaper, I received a phone call. No caller ID, I answered. At first, there was only static. Then I heard my father's voice. He sounded exactly as I remembered. "Son?" I couldn't speak. He whispered, "You left something here." My hands started shaking. "What?" A long silence, then, "Your mother." The call ended. I haven't slept properly since. And every few weeks I drive past that road. The apartment complex is still there. People live there. Children play outside. Cars fill the parking lot. Everything looks normal. But sometimes around 2:13 in the morning, the streetlights flicker. And if the wind is blowing toward the highway, I can smell grilled onions, fresh fries, and warm bread. The last time I smelled it, I heard a voice coming from somewhere behind me. My father's voice. He said, "Your order is ready." I didn't turn around, because this time, I knew exactly who was standing behind me, and I knew that if I looked, I wouldn't be coming home alone. Story 4, my name is Daniel Carter, and for 6 years I worked night shifts at different fast food restaurants across Ohio. I never believed in ghosts. I believed in tired employees, broken security cameras, strange customers, and people doing stupid things after midnight. That changed because of a Burger King that officially didn't exist. It happened in November 2024, outside a small town called Ashford, Ohio. I was 29 at the time, recently divorced, and honestly, I needed the money. My daughter Emma was 7. She lived with her mother, and every other weekend, I picked her up and took her to my apartment. I wasn't proud of my situation, so when my manager offered me an overnight position at a newly renovated Burger King, about 40 minutes outside town, I accepted immediately. The shift was from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. The restaurant stood beside an old highway surrounded by woods. There were no houses nearby, no gas station, no apartment buildings, just trees, an abandoned motel, and the highway. The first thing I noticed was the parking lot. It was enormous, far too large for a restaurant that barely received customers after dark. There were about 20 security lights around the property, but 3 of them never worked. My manager, Rick, told me they had been trying to fix them for months. Then he gave me one strange piece of advice. "If you hear the drive-thru speaker after 2 a.m., he said, don't answer it." I laughed. I thought he was joking. He wasn't. That first night was completely normal. I cleaned tables, restocked the freezer, counted the cash. At 1:47 a.m., the last customer left. At 2:10, I locked the front doors. And then the restaurant became unbelievably quiet. At 2:31 a.m., I heard something through the drive-thru speaker. "Welcome to Burger King. May I take your order?" I froze. Nobody was in the drive-thru. I checked the security monitor. The lane was empty. I walked toward the window. Nothing. Then the speaker crackled again. This time I heard a little girl's voice. "Daddy?" My stomach dropped, because I knew that voice. It sounded exactly like my daughter. "Hello," I whispered. The speaker went silent. Then came three words. "Daddy, I'm cold." I immediately grabbed my phone and called Emma's mother. No answer. I checked the time. 2:34 a.m. I told myself it was some kind of recording. Maybe someone had hacked the system. Maybe an employee had left something playing. I searched every corner of the restaurant. Nothing. Then I checked the drive-thru camera. The screen showed the empty lane. But at the very end of the road between the trees, there was a small figure, a little girl, standing completely still. I zoomed in. She was wearing a red jacket. Emma had a red jacket. My hands started shaking. I ran outside. The cold air hit my face. "Emma!" No answer. I walked toward the tree line. The figure was gone. I searched for almost 10 minutes. Nothing. When I returned to the restaurant, the drive-thru window was covered in fingerprints. Small fingerprints. Children's fingerprints. There were dozens of them, all on the inside of the glass. I called Rick. He answered after several rings. I told him what happened. There was a long silence. Then he said, "Daniel, did you answer her?" "No." "Good. Who was that?" Another silence. Finally, he said, "I'll tell you tomorrow." Then he hung up. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, Rick arrived at 7:15. He looked exhausted. He didn't ask what happened. Instead, he locked the front door, pulled down the blinds, and sat across from me. Then he told me something I still wish I had never heard. 23 years earlier, there had been another Burger King on the exact same property. Same highway, same woods, same drive-thru. It had closed after a terrible accident. A 9-year-old girl named Lily Morgan had disappeared from the restaurant during a late-night shift. Her father was working that night. He was the assistant manager. According to police reports, Lily had been waiting in the dining area while her father finished closing duties. At around 2:30 a.m., he heard her screaming. When he ran outside, she was gone. They searched for 3 weeks. Nothing. No body, no clothing, no evidence. But there was one strange detail. The drive-thru speaker had recorded Lily's voice after she disappeared. The recording was only 7 seconds long. Her father kept repeating that she was still somewhere nearby. Nobody believed him. 6 months later, he disappeared too. The old Burger King was demolished. Years passed. Then the property was rebuilt, and somehow the new restaurant had the exact same drive-thru layout. I asked Rick why they built there. He looked at me. "Because nobody told corporate what happened." I laughed nervously. "You expect me to believe a ghost is using the drive-thru?" Rick didn't smile. "I've worked here for 4 months. You're the 4th night manager. The other 3 quit. Why?" He leaned closer. "Because they answered." That night I almost quit. But then I thought about Emma. I needed the job. So I stayed. For the next 3 nights, nothing happened. Then on Friday at exactly 2:31 a.m., the speaker turned on. "Welcome to Burger King. May I take your order?" I didn't move. The voice changed. This time it was a man's voice. An older man. "Danny?" I stared at the speaker. Nobody called me Danny except my father. My father had been dead for 8 years. I stepped backward. The voice came again. "Son, I'm sorry." I started crying. I hadn't cried about my father in years. I walked toward the speaker. "Who is this?" Silence. Then my father's voice whispered, "She isn't Lily." My blood went cold. "What?" "She's looking for another father." The speaker clicked off. At that exact moment, every light inside the restaurant went out. Total darkness. I grabbed my flashlight. The security monitors were still working. I looked at the drive-thru camera. A little girl was standing at the window. Red jacket, wet hair, head tilted downward. I couldn't breathe. She slowly raised her face. Her eyes were completely black. Then she smiled. The drive-thru speaker activated again. "Daddy?" I backed away. "No. Please. No. I'm cold." I ran into the office and locked the door. For nearly an hour, I sat there listening to footsteps outside. Small footsteps, bare feet, Walking across the restaurant floor, tap, tap, tap. Then they stopped outside the office. A tiny hand touched the glass. I heard a child's voice. "Why won't you let me in?" I didn't answer. Then another voice came from behind me. My father's voice. "Because he's not your father." I turned around. Nobody was there. The footsteps stopped. At 3:18 a.m., everything went silent. When the sun came up, I left. I never intended to return, but when I reached my car, I found something on the windshield. A photograph. Old. Damaged. It showed the inside of the Burger King. In the photograph were three people. A man, a little girl, and a teenage boy. The man was Lily's father. The girl was Lily. And the boy was me. I dropped the photograph. I didn't understand. I had never been there. I was only 6 years old when Lily disappeared. But then I noticed something written on the back. A date, November 14th, 2001. And underneath it, Daniel was there. I drove directly to my mother's house. I hadn't spoken to her about my childhood in years. I showed her the photograph. The moment she saw it, she started crying. That was when she finally told me the truth. My father had worked at that Burger King. The night Lily disappeared, he had taken me to work because my mother was sick. I was 6. I had been sleeping in the back office. But at 2:31 a.m., I woke up. I walked outside, and I saw Lily. She was crying. She told me she couldn't find her father. I took her hand. We walked toward the back door. Then my father found us. He screamed at me. He told me never to talk about what happened. My mother said I had blocked most of it from my memory. But Lily had disappeared that night, and my father had spent the rest of his life believing he was responsible. He didn't kidnap her. He didn't hurt her. He simply turned away for a few seconds, and those seconds were enough. I asked my mother one question. "What happened to Lily?" She looked at me. "We never found her." That night I went back to the Burger King. I know that sounds crazy, but I needed answers. It was 2:27 a.m. when I entered. I turned on every light. Then I stood in the middle of the dining room. Lily? Nothing. I waited. 2:31. The drive-thru speaker turned on. "Welcome to Burger King," I whispered. "Lily, I'm sorry." The speaker crackled. "You left me." I closed my eyes. "I was 6. I waited." "I know. You promised you'd come back." I remembered. A tiny hand, a red jacket, a little girl crying beside the back door, and my 6-year-old voice saying, "I'll come back." But I never did. I walked toward the back hallway. There was a door there that shouldn't have existed. Behind it was an old storage room. The walls were covered with children's drawings, hundreds of them, and in the center of the room was a red jacket. I recognized it immediately. The same jacket from the security camera. I picked it up. It was freezing cold. Then I heard breathing behind me. I turned. Lily was standing there. She didn't look terrifying anymore. She looked like a frightened little girl. "Are you my daddy?" I shook my head. "No." She looked disappointed. Then I said, "But I remember you." Her face changed. For the first time, she smiled without fear. "That's enough." The lights went out. A loud crash came from the dining room, then silence. When the lights returned, Lily was gone.